Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me here today as we get to talk about one of my favorite subjects, comic books. My name is Jose. I love comic books. I love talking about them. I love sharing them with you. Feel free to follow me on social media if you would like. Links are in the description below. I've also posted a link to the Marvel fan site that'll have plot synopsis and character bios for this issue. The Uncanny X-Men 171 from 1983. Rogue joins the X-Men. And love this cover. Walter Simonson does the pencils inside. Welcome to the X-Men, Rogue. Hope you survive the experience here. This is right before Thor 337, where Walt Simonson takes over as writer-artist. So, alright. Great cover here. Rogue, of Storm, Colossus, Kitty Pryde, and Nightcrawler all chasing Rogue. This is the classic X-Men or X-Men Classic that had this reprinted this issue. I like the other one better. This one just with Colossus by itself. So the title is actually called Rogue. And so, real quick, I do have a playlist, several playlists actually. I have an X-Men playlist. I have a New Mutants playlist. I have a Wolverine playlist. And I also have a playlist. It's called X Universe. And it's everything. It's all in reading order. And X Universe ones includes absolutely everything. So the X-Men one only has the X-Men issues, New Mutants only New Mutants, Wolverine only Wolverine. But if you ever want a full of the Claremont verse, as I like to call it, the X Universe, everything, and like I mentioned, it's all done in reading order. So, all right. So again, Storm yelling here. Morlocks, by right of combat, I, Storm, am now your leader. My word is law. This is beginning the changes of Storm. And here you can see all the Morlocks raising their fists. And you can see that Storm is wearing the jacket of leadership here. We have our credits here. Chris Claremont, Walter Simonson, Bob Wycheck. And then we still have Orzechowski and Glynis Wein. Louise Jones is still the editor, with Jim Shooter the editor-in-chief. And Storm continues here. If you wish to live apart from humanity in these tunnels, 1,000 feet below the streets of New York, then so be it. But no more will you treat its inhabitants as prey. So, you will not attack them for money or for sport. You will not steal their children to swell your ranks. You will not kill them. And this one says here, they hunt us. We're mutants like you, Storm, outcasts, hated simply because we exist. Why shouldn't we give as good as we get, says this Morlock. And Storm says, because I forbid it. Are any here willing to challenge me, she says. And so Storm comes off. She says, I thought not. If you would have peace and a secure future, Morlocks, trust me, do as I command. The alternative is too terrible to contemplate. So Storm is now not messing around anymore. She is establishing command immediately here. So we have Callisto here, whom she beat in the previous issue. Callisto yells out at Storm, and Storm says, "You shouldn't be up, Callisto. You'll reopen your wound," she says, as if you remember here, she was stabbed the previous issue. And Callisto says, "Enjoy your triumph while you can, Wind Witch, because I'm not done with you. I'll have my rightful place again, and I will lead the Morlocks, and I will have your heart in the bargain." And Storm is like, look at her. This is badass Storm. This is the start. I mean, she was always a badass, but I mean, now she's really a badass. And Storm says, "We have crossed knives once, little mutant. Don't push your luck." So look at this. Just total domination. And Storm picks her up like a child. "Sunder, put your mistress back to bed. And this time make certain she stays there." And so Nightcrawler behind her says, "You seem to be going out of your way uh to make an enemy of Callisto." And Storm says, "We were enemies the moment we met, Nightcrawler. We shall remain so till the day we die." But on the new with the Krakoa things, we have actually quite a change. Somehow, evolution happens, and so we can't just remain with these stories, but the Krakoa era changed a lot of the Chris Claremont era. So Storm continues here, "Nothing I do or say will ever change that." And Nightcrawler thinks, "Perhaps, but the Ororo I remember would have at least tried." But, as I mentioned, this is the new Storm, so she would have died rather than kill another. Yet in the duel, Ororo stabbed Callisto through the heart. Only the fact that one of Callisto's fellow Morlocks was a healer enabled her to survive. Ororo is changing before my eyes, but what truly terrifies me is that she doesn't seem to mind. So, all right, we're now in Anchorage, Alaska, and here you see a fire, and the fire is, of course, in the fireplace, and Madeline Pryor is sleeping. And suddenly she wakes up here and says, "No, dear Lord in heaven, no," as she kind of screams. And Scott hears, and he runs, yells out for her. "What's the matter? I heard you scream." And she says, "Scott, hold me, please, as tight as you can. I need something real, to prove myself I'm still alive." And she hugs him and embraces him. And so they sit in the bed together. I like it. She's wearing the top of the pajamas. He's wearing the bottom of the pajamas. So she begins her story here. And Madeline says, "Before coming north, I was a commercial pilot, 747s, the big time. My last flight was a long haul into San Francisco. We ran into a freak storm, lost an engine, barely made it home. As we touched down, the wing collapsed. We crashed. There was an explosion, fire all around me. Screams, so many screams. I don't remember the details. I don't want to. Everybody died but me. I wasn't even scratched," she continues. "I still have nightmare about it. September 1st, 1980, my own personal day of infamy." And Scott goes in his thoughts here, "But that's the day Jean Grey died. So something is up." Now, here's kind of the thing. The original plan was not to make Maddie into the clone of Jean Grey. That was done simply because when X Factor was created, they resurrected Jean Grey, much to Chris Claremont's chagrin. He didn't want that, but that's what was done. So he worked it and made her a clone, but this was just going to be coincidence. Of course, it ended up not being that. Here's the thing. I think, and we will get into X Factor when the time is right, because again, we're going to follow all this chronologically. So we will, I think that it was even though it's not what Chris Claremont wanted, sometimes things happen and you have to make the best of it, and sometimes it's better than perhaps. I think that turning her into Jean Grey's clone actually elevated Maddie into someone, that isn't just a footnote, or Scott's wife or whatever. So I think that this was what I guess you would say a happy, um, not a happy coincidence, but I just think that it turned out into a better story by having her turned into the clone of Jean Grey. So we're kind of gonna go through here. So this is the house of Carol Danvers's parents in Massachusetts, Beverly, Massachusetts. And here's Carol Danvers here, and her mom and dad. I love the mom wearing the apron here. Carol Danvers went to visit her parents, and they asked, when we'll see you again. And she says, I don't know. Well, she's gonna be moving a lot, and she just says, stay in touch. We'll miss you. And Carol says, I miss them too, or I'll miss you too. The mom takes care of her, tell her to be careful. And so as she walks away, she thinks here, and we'll concentrate on this part here. If only she knew how much, for good or ill, Charles Xavier did his best to restore my memories after Rogue had stripped them from my powers, from me. Thanks to him, I pretty much um oh, sorry. I remember pretty much all of who I was, but there are no emotions to go along with them. I like this pose here of binary. I love Walter Simonson. He is one of my absolute favorites. I'm covering his Thor run. I have a playlist, and I'm covering his Orion run. I also have a playlist on that. Walter Simonson is one of my absolute favorites. And so Carol says here, she once really loved her parents, but because of everything that's happened, she just has affection and toward them, but she calls it a vague affection. So you see her now turn into binary here. And so she basically says here, what's done is done. Feeling sorry for myself won't make it any better. My life as Carol Danvers may be over, but binaries has just begun. So all right, and now we are at Xavier's school here. And so Kitty here is having a tantrum here and says, I'm going to kill him. And here you can see her throw some pillows. And, Ileana, Colossus' sister, says, is this really necessary, Kitty? And Kitty says, how can I do any work without the proper lesson programs for my computer? And how can I keep track of the programs if those darn new mutants keep swiping my floppy disk? I love it. Floppy disk was the thing of back then. And Kitty goes, I've looked everywhere, Liana. They're probably lost forever thanks to those stupid X babies. And Ileana says, then what's that under your keyboard? And she's like, my disc, right where you left them. Oh, and I'm such a jerk, she says. No argument there, says Ileana. So we now go into the danger room where Charles Xavier is doing some exercises for his legs. He can walk again. Again, I have a playlist. So after the Brute saga, they constructed a new body for him, and the legs work. But he has issues getting them to work. A psychosomatic pain. So he's not able to use his legs for long moments yet, and you can see that based on the sweat here that it strains him quite a bit. And so he says here, no more, please, I beg you. And Lilandra says, problems? And he says, when I use my legs, the psychosomatic pain I feel inhibits my psionic pain, especially my ability to screen out other people's thoughts. And so he tells her about Kitty's pride's tantrum, and it's giving him a headache. He meditates for a moment and clears his head. Um, he says, I wish I could eliminate my phantom pain as easily. And Lilandra says, you should be able to. After all, you are the strongest mutant mind on Earth, among other things. And here they kiss here. And Xavier says, what do you suggest? And Lilandra says, we could play doctor. And She says again, seriously, Charles, I would like to give you a thorough examination. Perhaps your condition isn't psychic in nature, but physical. So, upstairs, Peter is has a cookbook here. He's in the kitchen. He's looking at a recipe, and Xavier says, "Colossus, we have a visitor." And so, at once, Professor, says Colossus. And so, Colossus goes downstairs, and he says, he addressed me as Colossus. That indicates an element of a danger. So he goes to open the door, and he shifts to his armored form, and he goes, "You!" And here we have Rogue in a three-quarter panel here, so not quite a splash page. And she says, "Please don't hit me. Sorry, don't hit me, please. Don't hit me. I I don't want to fight. I need the X-Men's help. I gotta have it, or I'm as good as dead," she says. And there's Colossus with this fist, but it does not look like he hit her. He just kind of got a little aggravated, I guess. So we now have everyone except Wolverine. I'm covering the Wolverine limited series. He'll be back next issue. So, um, as I mentioned, everybody's here. And so we get a brief. Everybody's during this Jim Shooter era. It was everybody's first issue, or somebody. It was always somebody's first issue. So, um, Chris Claremont always kind of explained a little bit about everything kind of going on to give new people a chance to catch up. So of course, everybody knows who the hell she is, but for the reader, Storm says her name is Rogue, a member of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Through direct physical contact, she absorbs the abilities and memories of others. So this is said out loud for the benefit of the reader. It isn't so much because they don't know, but again, for the benefit of the reader. And Nightcrawler says, "Could this be a diversion, the prelude to an attack?" And Xavier says, "I've side-scanned the estate, Nightcrawler. She is quite alone." And so Xavier asks Rogue, "Why are you here, child? What do you want?" Um, and you can see her hands are shaking, holding the tea or coffee. And Rogue says, "You're the telepathic Xavier. You tell me." And the professor says, "Professor Xavier, if you please." I cannot effectively read your mind, Rogue. You possess two diametrically opposed thought patterns. One of them alien. It sets up an interference pattern, and I am thus far unable to penetrate it. And Rogue says, "That's the persona I absorbed from Carol Danvers when I absorbed her powers last year. I didn't intend the transfer to be permanent. It was an accident. It's driving me crazy, Professor. You've got to help me." And Kitty's like, "You've got some nerve, Rogue, asking that after all you've done." And Xavier says, "Hush, Kitty. Go on, Rogue." And so the dialect here is to say, because she's, I believe, Southern. So instead of, so she says, "My powers are out of control. The slightest touch triggers the transfer. It's getting so I don't know which anymore which thoughts or memories or feelings are mine. I look into a mirror and see a stranger's face." And Nightcrawler says, "If you ask me, a most apt punishment for your crimes." So, and poor Rogue. And Rogue continues, "I tried to make Mystique understand, but she wouldn't listen. She was certain we could work things out on our own. I love her, Professor. She's been like my mom to me. But I knew she was wrong. I turned her to the X-Men, even though we're enemies, because you're my only hope." And Kitty thinks here, "Give me a break." And Xavier says, "Kitty." And she says, "I didn't say anything." And Xavier says, "Your thoughts were plain enough." And Kitty says, "That's not fair." "Are you being fair to Rogue?" says the professor. And Nightcrawler and everyone just kind of stares at Xavier. And Nightcrawler says, "Is there any reason why we should be here?" And the professor says, "I accept your dislike and distrust of her, X-Men, but I would rather not conduct an examination with uh, concentrated negative emotions so close at hand. I'll summon you when I'm finished." And Storm says, "Are you sure this is wise, Professor? She's dangerous." And Professor says, "Leonard and I can take care of ourselves, Storm. And as for Rogue, I believe we have nothing to fear from her." And look at poor Rogue here. Just so sad here. And so Colossus closes the door behind them, and he says, "I've never heard him so angry. What did we do?" And Nightcrawler says, "Should we leave him alone with Rogue?" And Storm's still wearing um the oh my gosh, the jacket vest here. "The professor gave us little choice, Kurt. We must assume he knows best." And Kitty's like, "I want to hit something." And Colossus is like, "What else is new?" "Oh, sorry, here. I just can't stand around waiting, or it'll drive me as nuts so as Rogue. I just want to hit something." So, and Storm says, "She has a point, Colossus. Perhaps a session in the danger room will cool all our various temperatures and frustrations." So they go to the danger room here, and so they go down, and they're gonna set up a scenario for them. And suddenly here they're in Belasco's, and we get told of how Ileana had been there for a while. And so that was covered in X-Men 160. Again, I have a playlist. I'm going to move on here. And Ileana is traumatized by that. And Katie's like, "Ileana, have you flipped? What could you have been thinking of?" Um, and Katie's like, "I'm aborting your sequence, reverting the room to normal. Did you do this intentionally, Ileana, or was this your surprise?" And look at the eyes turn red here. "You scared the life out of me, and I'll bet the others as well. Belasco's one creep I never want to see again, even as a holographic illusion. I figured you'd feel the same." And Kitty's like, "Hey, Ileana, are you okay?" "I guess not. Ileana, it's me, Kitty, your roommate, your best friend." And here she pulls out the soul sword. And of course, this is the first time. Where'd that sword come from? We are I call it the soul sword because that's the name of it, because I've read these in before. So but at this time this was new. And Katie's like, "Wow, she means business," says Ileana. Does this at her. She says, "My cheek, I'm bleeding, but I was phasing. That blade would have passed. That blade should have passed harmlessly through me, but that blade does not. She doesn't recognize me. She means to kill me, and she'll do it too if I'm not careful. I've got to disarm her." And so, as she faces through, she keeps her feet from phasing and knocks the sword out of her. And she goes, "Kitty, where am I?" And Kitty says, "With your friends, you're home, you're safe." And she goes, "I saw Belasco. I remembered." And so um, you can see Kitty giving her a big hug. And so the Storm, Colossus, and Nightcrawler arrive. She says it was an accident, and she freaked out when she saw Belasco. And Nightcrawler says, "We all did." And Kitty says, "She'll be fine, guys. Just give us some time to ourselves, okay? It's no big deal, please. She'll be all right. Everything is going to be all right." As Ileana continues to cry here. And so Storm's in her attic and creates a little shower for her plants, which have been neglected a little bit here. And so she sits and ponders. And so here we will skip this portion here, but we'll go here. And she says, "I feel as though I stand at a crossroads. To remain an X-Men, especially as leader, I must sacrifice the beliefs that give my life meaning, yet the alternative means leaving those I love forever. This is my home. They are my family. How can I desert them? And Xavier told me the day we met that my powers should be used for the benefit of all humanity. Was I wrong to listen? Can I deny the responsibility? I don't know. And then she hears thunder. And so um her little rain shower has grown too much because she's so angry here, and so it destroyed her plants here. And Xavier finally comes in and says, "Storm, my examination of Rogue is finished. Please report to my study." And look at her. It's because of you I became an X-Men, old man, and that decision is destroy me, as she hurls a knife through his astral projection. And Xavier, look at him sweating here. I broke my silence with Storm. I caught a thought flash from her. She's unusually disturbed. And Ileana says, have you probed deeper to learn why? And Xavier says here, that will have to wait, Rogue. That'll have to wait. Rogue is my primary concern at present. If it's a serious problem, she'll no doubt tell me. So the X-Men have been gathered here, and Xavier says, I've questioned Rogue at length, and I am convinced of both her need and her sincerity. Therefore, I've decided to admit her not only to the school, but to the X-Men as a probationary member. So, and Storm says no, and Xavier's like, I beg your pardon. And she has a point. I lead the X-Men, Professor. I think that entitles me to some say in the matters. You know Rogue's history. Are we expected to fight beside someone we dare not trust, who might betray us at any time? Love the scream tone being used and applied here. Meanwhile, here comes Binary. She walks in. I love this. This is such a good setup here. And then pow! Look at this. What a freaking excellent. This is so good. And look, send her in orbit to the moon. I love comic books. Walter Simonson is absolutely a master. So, Rogue says, my goodness, I've been hit before, but never like this. I don't know who that hussy is or why she slugged me, but I am to make her regret it. So here we go. And she's like, I don't think this was Xavier's doing. He looked as surprised as the X-Men as she heads back here. And Xavier asks, X-Men, are any of you injured? And Kitty's like, wow, that was some punch. And Nightcrawler's like, Binary, where is she? Outside, waiting for Rogue. And then here comes Rogue. And Binary's like, that's the spirit, kiddo. Come and get me if you can. And then just punches Rogue here. And Colossus holds her and says, Binary, no more. And she's like, let me go, you big lummox. I don't want to hurt you, Peter. You will have to if you can wish to continue this fight. Is that what you want? And so here we go. We're almost done here. And Binary says, I want vengeance, Peter. Is that so wrong? And Xavier says, so long as Rogue remains under my roof, Binary, she has my protection. And Binary is like, how can you say that, Charles? You know better than anyone what she did to me. And Storm says, that child repents, my friend, and has been forgiven. What? When was this forgiveness? They were just in the middle of fighting. So this must have, I don't know. That part kind of threw me off because Storm was just adamant saying, you can't, you know. And so this child repents, my friend, and has been forgiven. Behold our newest X-Men, she says. And so Binary says, is this true? I wouldn't have thought you capable of such cruelty. And Rogue is like, what are you talking about? What my life got to do with you? We've never even met before today. And then, of course, Binary shows her her human, um, and she goes, perhaps this will. And she recognizes her as Carol Danvers, and we all know Carol Danvers is Captain Marvel nowadays. And she says, the woman whose life you destroyed, Rogue, except that now I possess the powers to do the same to you. And Storm says, Professor, if Rogue stays, I go. And Nightcrawler says, my apologies, Professor, but we all go. Wait, what? This. The child repents and has been forgiven. Behold our newest ex. This part is a little bit confusing. So if you're confused, it's okay, because I just kind of I haven't read these in a long time, so I'm reading them with you for the first time. But this panel here doesn't make sense. If everyone's been forgiven and behold our newest X-Men, then what the hell is this here? If Rogue stays, I go. What? And normally I can forgive a writer because they put in a lot of stuff, but not on the same freaking page. You can't do this in the top of the panel and then do this at the bottom of the panel. What? So this part makes no sense here. It probably, I don't know. This probably should have happened before Binary attacked, and then ending with this part here. So, all right, so we'll continue here. And Xavier says, I see we pick and choose who we help. Is that it? Some are worthy, others are not. And Xavier continues, who was it, Ododo, told me Wolverine was an X-Men not because of his sterling character, but his potential for good? That to deny him, though we abhor his violent nature, would thereby deny our true reason for being, which is to help him achieve that potential. The same argument holds for Rogue, does it not? Of course, there's a risk in accepting her, but consider the alternative. At least with us, she has a chance for a better life. Deny her, and we condemn her outright. And that I will never do to any mutant so long as breath remains in me. And the X-Men all stare at him. So this part probably should have been done right before Carol Danvers came in and attacked here. So I trust you as I would my own father, Professor, so I will put aside my fears and give Rogue a chance. I ask my friends to do the same. And Kitty says, I will if I have to, but I won't like her ever. All right, you win. So he says to, Nightcrawler says to Xavier. And the professor looks at Carol, and Carol says, what do you want from me, Charles? Understanding? My approval? I'll concede one thing, but not the other. Rogue tore my life. The very shreds. Sorry. Rogues tore my life, my very soul to shreds, and those scales can never be balanced. I'm sorry. I'm just not that forgiving. I have nothing to lose here, Charles. No real ties to break. That makes my decision easy. I'm not an X-Men, and all of a sudden, I'm glad as she busts out and leaves. And so now we go to the last page here, and Rogue says, will she be back? And Nightcrawler says, in her own time, perhaps, when the hurt is less. And Xavier looks at Storm and calls her out. And Storm says, Carol is right. And you are right, Professor. So which is the better road to follow? Like all of you, that's a decision I must make for myself. And so she says here, what now, Wind Rider? Would that I could soar home free and uncaring as a bird to the woman I was, the life I led. And so she is having so this internal monologue is basically the issues she's kind of trying to overcome here, which are very important for the character and where she's gonna. So I'm gonna continue here. Does every adult yearn for childhood? Every person face such awful dilemmas. I wish I were the goddess men thought me in Africa, for then with a wave of the hand I could cure every ill and make everyone happy. But I am only human and I must therefore cope like everyone else as best as I can. This is my moment of truth. I want to leave, yet duty demands I stay, though that means accepting rogue. Whatever I choose, I will no longer be the woman I was, but what what will I become? Aurora or Storm? Which is it? Next, Scarlet in Glory. And the return of Wolverine. So, all right. Uncanny X-Men 171. Written by Chris Claremont. Drawn by Walter Simonson with Bob Wyacek. Like and subscribe. I do thank you for listening. Goodbye.